Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here every Monday at 7 p.m. on the Cover One YouTube channel or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, Kyle Silagyi, joined this and every week. Sorry, I'm moving my microphone closer. Joined this and every week by Cover One features writer Rob Quinn, and today we are going to break down the Buffalo Bills' 43-21 dismantling of the Washington football team. Wasn't a particularly close game, but that should make for some pretty entertaining content. So we're going to tell you our takeaways from the game. We're going to look at what went right, what went wrong, and that's pretty much it. But it'll be a good show, I promise. So joining me to discuss this wonderful Buffalo Bills win, it's Rob Quinn. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing good. A little better than last week. Last week we had talked about Josh Allen and was his contract an albatross and was the season burning up in flames before our eyes. So it's good to get back on track and have a complete win to talk about this week.
Yeah, I think you underestimated, just how harsh we were last week, because we had people in the comments threatening to cancel us. Someone said he was going to personally, or they were personally going to cancel our show. So it was Eric's burner, I guess. I don't know. I never talked to Eric about it, but this guy was going to cancel our show, but he didn't. We're back. We're back for episode 10. This is a milestone for us, Rob.
Yeah, I saw that. It's going great. We're glad to have all the viewers and people in the chat that interact and everyone that downloads and listens after the fact. So really appreciate you. And here's to another 10 more, hopefully. So.
Well, it only makes sense that we're on episode 10, and for the first time, someone has noticed the sign in the background without me pointing it out. Jessica Tennis writes, "You need to redo that sign in the background. Barely can read the Josh." I will say that. Yeah, I'll take that critique. Perhaps that does have to be in a bolder writing. But I will say, look, I don't want to start drama. Okay, I'm not a drama starter. I don't want to start drama here in the Cover One podcast sphere, but I just want to say it's awfully convenient that I low-key had signs in the background for a couple of weeks, and then Aaron Quinn started putting signs in his background. It could be a great minds think alike scenario, but also, no one tweet this at No one tweet this at Aaron, please. I don't want to start drama, but it is what it is. So. Yes, Rob, this and every show on Cover One and Cover One in general are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. So before we go any further, can you tell us a little bit about Underdog?
So Underdog Fantasy is an awesome fantasy sports app. Last week I took a week off because I was just losing too much money doing their player prop parlays and the daily fantasy sports that they have. So I'm back on this week, only down a cool $80. So I didn't really learn anything in my time off, but hopefully you can. So if you use the code COVER1, you will get a free $25 with a deposit of $25. It's really cool. You could do over-unders on stats for all the games. It makes it really fun to watch. So yeah, use the code COVER1 and get to win some money.
Again, that is promo code COVER1. Lone Wolf writes, "You don't have an Xmas tree though. Next week I will have a Christmas tree. And then if someone calls me out, I'm going to say, it's a coincidence."
Disguise coverage. Never heard of them.
Right. I have no idea what that show is. Sorry. So our viewership's about to drop about 50%, which is sad, but it's going to drop 50% because we don't have a Roundup this week. And I know that's everyone's favorite segment. Everyone loves the Roundup, but unfortunately there just really isn't any rumors or news to talk about. We had an in-depth segment about Quentin Dunbar last week, which proved to be a wonderful usage of our time and the time of everyone listening to this podcast. I didn't hear any Jordan Poyer injury updates. I know he had a banged-up foot at the end of yesterday's game, but I don't know if there's any updates. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, so today, Sean McDermott just said he's day-to-day, and it's nothing crazy that's going to impact him for next week. So all's clear on the Jordan Poyer front.
We did have a Roundup after all. So if you left, you can come back. So I think we are now going to move right into this recap of the Buffalo Bills. Again, just domination of the Washington football team. We said last week, we'll just give some overarching thoughts of the game here before we get into our individual takeaways, what went right, what went wrong, etc. But we said last week that like Washington's not a bad team, but they're just not in the same tier as Buffalo. Like Buffalo really shouldn't have had an issue with Washington. They're a fun team. They could be good in the future, but this year they're just not that. And I think this is about as good of a game as we could have hoped for out of Buffalo. Josh Allen looked stellar. We'll get into that. Just overall, a well-played game on both sides of the ball. There was a special teams mishap, but we might get into that. We might not. But Rob, before we get into the nitty-gritty here, do you have any just overarching thoughts on the game?
Yeah, like you said, we just saw a complete game. And like the first week, it was the offense that stalled and the defense played well. And then the second week against Miami, it was the defense that played well and the offense sputtered. And then this week, they were just firing on all cylinders. And like you said, with the exception of a special teams mishap that was just from Mother Nature and Antonio Gibson's run, that was really the only negatives you can come away with from that game. And I think that was a performance that the Bills needed to say, hey, like this is still who we are. We are still an explosive offense, and now we're a dominant defense as well. And let's get this thing rolling for the rest of the season.
So we ended last week's episode, which again was mainly positive. I think we were largely complimentary of the Bills, and we just said, if there's one thing we didn't like, it was Josh Allen wasn't great. And again, we almost got canceled. The people did not like our critique of Josh Allen. And we said, this is probably just, a 2-week thing. He'll bounce back. We know that he's a better quarterback than what he's been. And this week he was. So we are going to start this week where we left off last week. And we are going to do a joint takeaway to kick off here, a bonus takeaway for the people in the chat. Our joint takeaway is that Josh Allen's all the way back. He was electric in this win. From start to finish, 32 of 43 for 358 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, had another one on the ground. To get into a little bit of the advanced stats from, I wrote them down here, Phil Murphy at Phil_sports on Twitter. He was 27 of 37 for 290 yards against the standard rush and was 5 out of 6 for 78 versus the blitz. Or when Washington was blitzing. So there really wasn't an aspect where he was bad, or where he was not less than stellar. He was just dialing throughout the entire game, surgical at times, methodical, and he also took risks at times, and most of the time those risks paid off with Emmanuel Sanders, beautiful ball to him. He had a one missed deep ball to Diggs, but I think that was more of the wind. We kind of just talked about the wind with the special teams mishap, but the wind was crazy there yesterday from what I've heard. But again, just Allen, a wonderful game. I think that what else is there to say about Josh Allen's wonderful game other than it was a wonderful game?
Man, it was incredible. And Josh Allen last week said that, the frustration from his struggles was starting to get into his head. And we all know Allen is his own worst enemy in these situations. And he can get rattled when the pressure's on and when things aren't going his way. And the Bills made it a point to get him going early, getting the ball out quick, and then taking some shots downfield. And they ran up the score 21-0 pretty much before you even knew it was happening. So Washington really was out of the game early, and Josh Allen playing with the lead, being able to sit back and pick apart the defense. It was just a sight to see. And he won from every area of quarterbacking that you could imagine. Like I said, the quick game, the deep ball was connecting. On passes 10 plus yards downfield, he was 10 of 17 for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it wasn't like he was only doing this from clean pockets. I mean, the offensive line played well, but under pressure, he was 13 of 20, 65% completion rate for 189 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he was making plays all day, and Washington just didn't have an answer for him.
Yeah, we talked about Washington's defensive line last year and how it was a really talented unit, really talented front. And it could be a bit misleading. We could think that Washington really didn't pressure him all that much this game. I think Washington got semi-consistent pressure, but Josh Allen was just stepping up in the pocket and evading pressure like 2020 Josh Allen. He was just moving around in the pocket, rolling out. He had 2 passes that I noted here. This Emmanuel Sanders touchdown where he rolled out to the right. I think Cody Ford, that was one of the many plays where Daron Payne just kind of pushed Cody Ford back. And Josh Allen rolls out, finds Emmanuel Sanders on a beautiful pass in the end zone for the touchdown. And then there was another pass at the end of the half. He rolled out and found Beasley on just over the middle of the field on a rollout. Just again, a 2020 performance from Josh Allen, which we had seen 2018 Josh, 2019 Josh for the first 2 weeks of the season. It's only natural that we got 2020 Josh in week 3. Maybe we'll get 2021 Josh next week. But I think that pretty much wraps up the Josh Allen talk. It's just he was on point. He was electric. He was the reason why they won this. Well, I can't even say that because it was just a total team performance, but offensively, he led the way. This was the MVP caliber performance that we wanted to see out of him coming into the season. We wanted to see it in week 1, didn't get until week 3, but it's good that we saw it. And he really doesn't have any excuses to not do it again next week versus Houston.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. I think you would just be beating a dead horse if we went on further with Josh Allen's play. He was the stud yesterday, and it's the kind of performance we've grown to expect from him. And hopefully he carries it on next week against Houston.
Mm-hmm. John DeMarchi writes here in chat, Washington did pressure Josh, 6 quarterback hits, touchdowns to Sanders first and Moss, and the Josh Allen touchdown run all came escaping pocket. Yes, he was either escaping the pocket or moving up in the pocket, moving around in the pocket throughout the entire game. He was just, it was a franchise quarterback game from the franchise quarterback. So now we're going to get into our more individual, unique takes. I'll let you kick off here, Rob. What was your first takeaway from this Buffalo Bills win?
So for the second consecutive week, I have to toot the horn for my guy, Matt Milano. Matt Milano is an absolute beast, and we've seen him play at a high level for each of his first few seasons with the Bills. But this year, it's just he's taken it to another level. Yesterday, he had 6 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, another fumble recovery for the second consecutive week, a pass breakup, that huge hit on Taylor Heineke with the 4th down stop. Milano is just playing with his hair on fire. And Leslie Frazier talked about him today, saying that you could just feel his intensity on the field. And I talked about this last week, is just he's a player that you can feel jumping off the screen, the hits that he delivers, the skills and range and coverage and the impact that he makes is just second to none on this defense. And while the defense had some huge plays, the interceptions, a couple other stops, Milano was the one who was always around the ball, making those splash plays consistently. And you don't see him making mistakes. He's never in the wrong place. And I think that he's on his way to having an all-pro season this year.
And this is nothing new from Milano. I think this is just the best we've seen him.
Right.
He's always been, a nose for the ball type of player dating back to his rookie year. And just throughout his career, he's always whenever there's a play on the ball, Milano's either there, he's the one making the play, or he had something to do with it more often than not. But it's been injury concerns with him. It's always a lingering hamstring injury with Matt Milano. Thankfully, through 3 weeks, that hamstring is held up, and just his body in general is held up. And like you said, he has been one of, if not the best defender that the Bills have. Taron Johnson's giving him a run for his money, but he's the best linebacker that the Bills have had through these first 3 weeks. Like you said, he's just in on every play, always around the ball. Just like you said, the hits. You feel Matt Milano when he is on the field. Or when he's in on a play, that Matt Milano was in on that play. Finished the game with 1 pressure, 1 quarterback hit, a fumble recovery, which, again, a great example, a microcosm of Matt Milano. He misses the tackle on Logan Thomas. He kind of wraps him up. Logan Thomas gets off and then just goes upfield. Matt Milano doesn't stay on the field, or doesn't stay on the turf. Matt Milano gets up, and then Tre'Davious White comes over, punches the ball out of Logan Thomas, and then, of course, Matt Milano's right there. Doesn't give up on the play that he missed, gets back in the play, ultimately gets the ball. Again, just a microcosm of the type of player that Matt Milano is. Been an incredible season, and like you said, I think he is on track to an all-pro type campaign. Maybe he and Taron Johnson will be all-pros, but I think that, again, what else is there to say besides Matt Milano has been electric?
Right. There's not much else to say. I mean, his stats for the season are already crazy. I think he's got like 16 tackles. He's in the league lead for tackles for loss. Just the impact that he's making on the field that you can feel, and then it's showing up in the box score is just telling of the impact that he's had this season.
I don't know why this didn't show up on the screen, but John DeMarchi, thank you for the super chat. In a 43-21 game, Josh going nuclear, etc. Game ball to Trey White for holding McLaurin to 3 for 25 until Buff was up 43-14. Trey traveled too. Spoiler alert, we'll get into that later. I've got some Tre'Davious White. I got to hand him his flowers a little later on, but yes, we will talk about Tre'Davious White later on in the program. And again, thank you for the super chat. Is that what it's called?
I believe so.
Look at me. It's almost like we've been doing this for 10 weeks, Rob. Almost like we're on episode 10.
Right.
So, Matt Milano has been great. Also, a player who was great yesterday, Emmanuel Sanders. My first takeaway from this game is that Emmanuel Sanders is as advertised on and off the field. Yesterday had 5 receptions for 94 yards and 2 scores. This coming on only 6 targets. It was funny because last week in his press conference, the same press conference in which he was like, I just want to win a Super Bowl, then I'm throwing my 2 fingers up and I'm going on a beach. You guys can stay in the cold weather. That was hilarious. I was hurt. It was directly offensive to me, but it was funny. Got to give it to Emmanuel Sanders. But he also said that, he wishes that he and Josh could connect on every pass. He wishes they could be 30 for 30, but that's just not going to happen. But they were 5 for 6 for 94. So that's, if you can't do 30 for 30, I mean, this was pretty damn good as well. Yes, Emmanuel Sanders did not look like a 34-year-old in this game. Granted, I don't know many 34-year-olds. I'm 24. I'm not hanging out with 34-year-olds all the time. Sue me. But Emmanuel Sanders wasn't playing like any 34-year-old that I know. He burned Kendall Fuller, who was 8 years younger than him, on that 41-yard. What did he run a streak? Was it or whatever it was? He just ran past Kendall Fuller, brought the ball down. Again, both touchdown receptions were great. The first one where Allen rolled out to his right and hit Sanders as he was falling to the turf, and then the other one, which was later in the game, the one where he handed the ball off to the kid afterwards. It was just a great route. He just kind of made a cut in the end zone and got any defender who was near him to no longer be near him. Josh Allen said after the game that Emmanuel Sanders does everything right, which watching this game, he did do everything right. Just the little things that come with being a veteran receiver were made evident. Just, stuff like catching the ball and immediately cutting upfield and picking up extra yardage, just stuff like that. A great game from Emmanuel Sanders. And as nice as it is to see him producing on the field, which, I mean, we touted all offseason, right, that Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a great fit in this offense. He's a piece that could succeed here. As nice as it is to see that analysis was correct and that he can be productive, again, 94 yards on 5 receptions for 2 touchdowns. That's very productive. But I love that he's also providing that veteran presence in the locker room that he was also supposed to bring. I mean, after the game, Micah Hyde and Josh Allen were asked about his game, about Sanders' performance on Sunday, and they both just said, yeah, it was a good game, but, he's here. He is the same guy every day, good player, a good locker room leader, someone who we all look forward to talking to, someone who we can all model ourselves after, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but basically saying that Emmanuel Sanders adds that championship pedigree and, is a player who does bring that juice to a team that wants to get over the hump. He's the only player on a Bills team that wants to win the Super Bowl that has won a Super Bowl. So you would hope that a player would be able to produce on and off the field, if he's being asked to do that, you would hope that he is able to do that. And through 3 weeks, he has been able to do that. So that's why I'm excited that he's everything that was advertised. He's not only being electric on the field, but he's being a helpful resource off it.
Right. And you don't get to be productive at 34 years old in the NFL unless you're doing everything right. And I think that having a player like him in the locker room is so important and crucial, because we know the Bills receiver room is pretty not old, but their experience with Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley. Like, these are guys who have been around the league and know how to do it. So I'm not just saying Sanders is beneficial to the receivers, but to guys like Josh Allen and throughout the entire locker room of some of those younger players. Like, look, like, I lasted 13, 14 years in this league, and this is how I do it. And I'm going out and putting up 94 yards and 2 touchdowns as a result of the way that I carry myself in the locker room, in the weight room, and off the field. So I think that these guys can learn a lot from him. But Sanders just had a huge day, and it was awful, and nobody cares about fantasy football, but I lost by 30, and he was on my bench with 24, and I was devastated. But he was huge for him. And the way that he runs routes, like you said, just catching the ball and immediately getting upfield for those extra yards, it's those things are underrated, but they're extra yards that move the sticks. And then he obviously connected on the big plays. At 34 years old, to have that kind of speed to beat a guy, like you said, who's 8 years younger than him is just so impressive. But I think that we might not see these huge 2 touchdown games from him, but I think that his impact is going to go beyond the box score in terms of opening, drawing coverage for Diggs when he eventually has his breakout game, and opening things up for Beasley underneath, and even Gabe Davis when they go to those 4 receiver sets. So I think that Sanders is going to be such a valuable piece of this team, not only now in the regular season, but if and when they make the playoffs through that stretch to show these guys, look, this is how it's done. And this is how we win games and ultimately win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I did some research after the game yesterday, and I wrote it in Slack, which this was not met with applause. But Emmanuel Sanders hasn't had a 2-touchdown game, a multi-score game, since week 2 of the 2017 season, I think. And those were the only 2 touchdowns he scored that entire year. So I'm not saying we're done seeing Emmanuel Sanders in the end zone, but I do think, as you said, this isn't going to be a consistent thing for Emmanuel Sanders. I don't think every week we're going to see him putting up 100 receiving yards and a touchdown or 2. But the receiving core is so deep that you don't need him to be that. I think the main reason, well, obviously what he brings to the field is very beneficial and was very attractive to the Bills. That's why they've been trying to go or get him for 3 years at this point. But I do think at this point it is what he brings in the locker room, the off the field aspect, that makes him more attractive than, just he's still a productive player, but it is that workman or that work ethic and that, like you said, just the professionality, is that a word? The professionalism of Emmanuel Sanders that makes him such a big addition to this team. And if his role, not diminishes, but decreases throughout the year as they try to get like a Gabriel Davis more involved or Isaiah McKenzie more involved in the passing game if they want to, that's fine because Emmanuel Sanders is still there. And I mean, he proved this week that if you need him to have that big game, he can still have that big game. So I think that wraps up Emmanuel Sanders talk. So we are going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. If you couldn't tell, it was a good offensive game for the Bills, 43 points. So Rob, what is your second takeaway from this win?
So I was bouncing around on this one, but I think we have to give Dawson Knox some credit. He was the whipping boy of the Bills for much of the last year or two and through the offseason as well, talking about his drops and just how the Bills needed to upgrade tight end. They needed to trade for Zach Ertz. They needed to draft somebody. But Dawson Knox has stepped up this season, and most notably yesterday, he made an incredible touchdown catch in the front corner of the end zone, showing awesome body control, good hands, as we've grown accustomed to see him do. Surprise, surprise. And he's just proving to be a productive member of this team on offense, and he's reliable. He did have a drop, but I don't know if you would even call that a drop because it was thrown behind him. But he finished with 4 catches for 49 yards and that touchdown. And Joe Marino posted a stat that in his last 12 games, including the playoffs, he has 7 touchdowns. He's caught 74% of the passes thrown his way. Josh Allen has a 133.7 quarterback rating when targeting him in those last 12 games, and he's dropped just 4% of the passes. So I think it's time we start giving Dawson Knox some credit. And, we're not going to get the Travis Kelce, Darren Waller type statistics from him. This offense just isn't geared that way around him. And you don't want Dawson Knox being the guy that's being targeted 12, 13 times a game. You have Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, but to have Dawson Knox get those 4 catches, 40 yards a week, I mean, those add up. And for the fantasy football gurus out there that just want to see numbers, that's still like 60 catches, 680 yards a season, which is fine production from a tight end. So I think we're seeing Dawson Knox really come into his own in this third year, become a well-rounded tight end. But most importantly, a good receiving option as a fallback option for Josh Allen, that he can be trusted, he can be relied upon, and that the work that he's put in this offseason, not only with the hand-eye coordination stuff, but with the timing of his routes. He talked about last year he was getting open too soon. So just learning how to set up his routes and set up defenders is all coming together for him. And I couldn't be happier for him. I thought he took a lot of like undeserved blame, but it's good to see him having some production and success this season.
What did you think of his touchdown celebration with Josh Allen?
Oh, that was awesome. That was great.
It was. I don't think it's as good as their hot rod celebration, but
no.
How many have they done? It was good. It was a solid. I'll give it an A-. No, that might be a little too complimentary, but no, it was a good celebration on what was a great touchdown reception. Just again, a beautiful ball from Josh Allen and a better catch from Dawson Knox, making sure to get an elbow down as he was falling before he went out of bounds. I was not a big Dawson Knox believer entering this season. I said something. Well, you know what? I tweeted it, so I'll say it anyway. When I was interning for the Bills in 2018, or through 2019, so the 2019 draft, I was in the draft, not the draft room. I was in the media room while they were making picks. So as one could expect how that would work, I and the other intern just got like names in the lead up to the draft, or in the lead up to their picks, being like, hey, have something ready on this guy in case this is the guy. And I was told like 2 or 3 different tight ends to have ready before I was told about Dawson Knox. So for me with Dawson Knox, it's always just been like, oh, he's just, another guy. But with Dawson Knox, as you said, he's now growing into a reliable tight end option. Again, he's not going to be Darren Waller. He's not going to be Travis Kelce, because this isn't the type of offense. This isn't an offense built around getting tight end production. And they have other receivers or other receiving options who you want to get the ball into their hands more than you want to get into the hands of Dawson Knox. But I do think we've seen considerable growth out of Dawson Knox this year. I think I was on record last year of saying the Dawson Knox experiment isn't fun anymore, or just like Dawson Knox isn't a fun player anymore, because he was doing more harm than good at times. But this year he's been doing more good than harm. He really hasn't done any harm for the most part. And I do think that touchdown reception was just the icing on top of what has been a solid season there for Dawson Knox thus far. So anything else to add about Dawson Knox before we get into my final takeaway?
Yeah, it's just a credit to the coaching staff and Brandon Beane for trusting not only in him, but in themselves, that they could develop him into something. Because if you, on the outside looking in, we were saying like, this is a liability if they go into the season with Dawson Knox as our tight end number 1, and then Tommy Sweeney and Jacob Hollister as our number 2 and 3s. And then they released Jacob Hollister. So it was a bit concerning going into the season saying, okay, like this is what we're riding on. But they saw something in him from that draft class up to now, saying like, this is a kid that when he puts it all together, he can be something solid for us. And that's what we've seen. And I think that being that he's a former quarterback and he's only played tight end for a couple of years, that there's only so much more that we're going to see from him and as he develops. So credit to Dawson Knox, credit to the coaching staff for putting that trust in him and themselves.
It's TEU, baby. He went to TEU. Now he's good.
That's all it takes.
Don Keith writes, that's not the right one. Knox has been the only player on offense who has done great all 3 games. Hey, we got yelled at for saying Josh Allen hasn't been great all 3 games. So
don't get yourself canceled, Don.
Right. I don't want to co-sign that one. And then Jessica Tennis writes, should I add Dawson to the sign also? Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Let's have one more good game before I write plus Dawson. I'll have a funnier sign next week, maybe. We'll see. I'll have to see what Aaron's sign is, and then I will just I'll decide based off that. So my second takeaway here is that Zach Moss is that guy. Devin Singletary may not be, but Zach Moss is that guy. 13 carries for 60 yards. He played on 56% of the offensive snaps. I don't think he started. I know he didn't start. Devin Singletary started, which we'll talk about later. But Zach Moss was the 1A as the game went along. I don't know if that was by design or if that was just like roll with the hot hand. I don't know if they went into the game thinking, okay, Zach Moss is going to get the majority of the carries as the game progresses, or if they just saw that he was playing better. But he averaged 4.6 yards per carry, which is pretty good. I can't remember if he had any like stellar games last year, but if you ask me, I do think this was one of, if not his best game as a professional. He wasn't flashy. It was just a really good game from Zach Moss, a really well-rounded performance. And he's like, they didn't focus on the run at all this game. I mean, Josh Allen threw the ball, 43 times we said? Mm-hmm. Like, they were still a pass-heavy offense, but they used the run to kind of not only give Josh Allen a break from time to time, but to just keep Washington on their toes. And Zach Moss, in a game where, I mean, you would think given his play style, he's the type of back who gets going later in games as you get him more carries. He'll heat up as you give him the ball more. They only gave him the ball on 13 handoffs this game, but he was still very productive, looked very good given his carries. So again, he had a role and he played well in that role in a game where the offense still relied on the pass. Zach Moss still played well. He showed solid vision, showed solid burst, also had a role in the receiving game, had three receptions total, had a receiving touchdown, 3 receptions for 31 yards. I don't even think his touchdown reception, while impressive, he fell, but he got back up and made a cut, juked a guy out, had a touchdown reception off of that. But I think his best reception was late in the first quarter. There was a few seconds left. He was just over the middle of the field, caught the ball, made a nice cut, made the Washington defender miss, and picked up 17 yards. So it was just a really nice, well-rounded game from Zach Moss, who I think really woke up after that week 1 inactive. Sean McDermott said it was a numbers thing, but I mean, Zach Moss is a good player. Like, I don't figure the numbers out. And I think, again, it may have just been a numbers thing, but whatever it was, it woke Zach Moss up because he was really good last week, had the 2 touchdowns, had that patented Zach Moss run on the goal line for the touchdown. And then this week, again, just a really well-rounded game. And he's just, like, selfishly, he's a fun player to watch. Like, he has a very fun play style. He is aggressive. He looks for contact, and he just puts his head down and runs guys over. It's just, he's a fun player to watch.
Yeah, no, I'm happy for Zach Moss. He's a player that I had really liked entering the draft and before last season, and to see him get that workload yesterday, not just here and there touches, but actually staying in the game and getting opportunities was cool to watch, especially like knowing that game and that defensive line is so tough and physical, and deciding that Zach Moss is going to be the one to lead the way. And he did. Like, Devin Singletary, I think, had like 12 carries. Zach Moss had 13, but Moss showed that in those physical settings, like, he's the guy you want. 60 yards, I think only 18 of them came after contact, but he was showing quickness that a lot of people, I don't think, knew that he had. They think he's just this bulldozer, but he was getting to the corner and getting upfield and looked really solid. And I think 4 of his runs went for first downs, but like you said, that reception that you talked about in the first quarter, just an awesome route on an angled route, just cutting, getting into open space for 17 yards. Zach Moss just had a complete game. And then in pass protection, I think he was only back there 3 or 4 times, but no pressures allowed for him once again. So I think, we're going to see a lot of Zach Moss and a lot of Devin Singletary going forward. I know Bill's Twitter is so hot and cold with whoever's the hot hand, and now Zach Moss is number 1. But like we've talked about all offseason leading up to week 1, that they don't need a running back 1. And I think they showed that in these first 3 games, that if you have a lighter box, Singletary can be the guy that can pick up those chunk yards. And if you have a team like Washington or someone with a strong front 7, that he can get you those much needed yards, and he's not going to take losses. I don't think any of his losses were for negative yards. His longest was 9. So that shows picking up 60 yards on 13 carries with a long of 9 that he was getting his head down, getting his nose dirty, and really fighting for those yards. So I was impressed with what I saw for Zach Moss, and I'm excited to see what he can do against a less impressive Houston Texans defensive line.
I do have a question. This is unrelated. This is a fantasy question. This isn't the fantasy show. Don't worry. We're not the Cover One fantasy show now, but I have McCaffrey on my team. I also have Jonathan Taylor. But McCaffrey's out. So can I trust Zach Moss as a running back too? Can I start him at running back this week, or should I be scouring the waiver wire?
I'm literally in the same exact situation. In 2 of my leagues, I have Christian McCaffrey and Zach Moss on the bench. But with my luck with fantasy sports, as I've said, I think every single week since we've been doing the underdog promos that I'm not good at fantasy. So I will say that I'm probably going to start Zach Moss just because if I have those backup Bills on my bench, they will get thrown into the lineup just because I talk myself into it. So I will probably start Zach Moss, but I wouldn't. So I recommend that you don't.
Sounds good. I will find. I also have Darrell Henderson, but I don't know if he's hurt too. It's just. Look, again, we're going to get into our Houston preview a little later. And by Houston preview, I mean we're going to talk about Davis Mills' neck. But, I tried to watch the Thursday night football game last week because, again, I have Christian McCaffrey. But when he got hurt in, the first quarter, I was like, I can't. I do not care. I cannot be asked. But the Panthers traded for C.J. Henderson today. So they're going to be a fun team.
Cover One Roundup veteran right there.
Right. We talked about him early. Well, we were wrong. If we said the Bills were going to trade for him, that's another expired take. But that wraps up the take. Again, speaking of takes, that wraps up the takeaway segment from our recap of the Buffalo Bills win over the Washington Redskins. Washington football team. Sorry. That's not good. Shut it down. Shut the whole thing down. We are now going to move on to what went right and what went wrong, the segment where we talk about what went right and what went wrong. So, Rob, I'll let you kick off here. What do you think went right in this game?
So the first thing that I think went right was the offensive line. This was a game that I was very nervous about seeing similar pass rush production as we did in week 1. I'm not going to go as far as to say the offensive line pitched a shutout. There was one Cody Ford, who got his lunch taken by Daron Payne. But John Feliciano has quietly put together 2 pretty impressive performances after having his own lunch taken by Cameron Hayward. This week he went up against Jonathan Allen, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He called him the best defender on Washington's front yesterday after the game, but he held his own. I mean, to have a guy like Jonathan Allen limited to 1 quarterback hit and 2 hurries, that is impressive. But not only that, it was Darrell Williams, 1 quarterback hit, 3 hurries against Chase Young. Deion Dawkins, 2 hurries versus Montez Sweat. But Cody Ford had a rough day, 2 quarterback hits, 10 hurries allowed to Daron Payne. But overall, I think if you're going to let one guy beat you on that defensive line, that's fine. What got them in trouble in week 1 was that not only was Cam Hayward dominating, but then TJ Watt was winning his matchups and Melvin Ingram were winning his matchups and Josh Allen had nowhere to go. So having just one guy consistently get pressure with a quarterback like Josh Allen, who is mobile, can maneuver the pocket and evade that pressure and still get throws off, really minimized the effect that Washington's highly touted front 4 was able to have. So not only in the passing game were they successful, but also running the ball. I think they had 122 yards, averaged over 4 yards a carry, just really physical and set the tone in both phases of the game. And I was impressed. I didn't think that Buffalo would be able to run the ball well. Mitch Trubisky added 19 of those yards, but overall, I think they ran the ball how they wanted to run it. They didn't become one-dimensional, and they stayed ahead of the sticks. Eric Turner posted something. They were running more on second down as well, back-to-back runs on first and second, which is something that we really haven't seen from Brian Daboll. So I think the commitment to run the ball and trusting, the offensive line to be physical and get movement against the defensive front like that was solid. And I'm excited to see them going forward. I don't think we're going to see them needing to be that physical, but it's promising to show that against a defensive line like that they can not only hold their own, but have success as well.
It was an overall strong game, I would say, by the offensive line. Darrell Williams, 4 quarterback pressures allowed. Okay, I'm not going to go through individually. I'll just say that there were 4 offensive linemen who allowed a combined 10 quarterback pressures, and Cody Ford allowed 12. So that's not a great game from Cody Ford. I was watching the game with my friend Matt. He doesn't watch the show, so I'll call him out. Who is an Oklahoma fan. So he's long been a Cody Ford fan. But yesterday, I think it was after the first or second play, again, one of numerous plays in which Cody Ford was pushed to the turf by Daron Payne. And my friend Matt said, that's why Cody Ford's a better tackle than he is a guard. And I was like, huh? Like, what are we talking about here? But Cody Ford, not a great tackle, wasn't a great guard yesterday. But as you said, on a defensive line like that, with Chase Young, with Jonathan Allen, with Montez Sweat, like if you're only going to let one guy get pressure consistently, I'll take that. That'll probably result in a win, or probably result in Josh Allen being able to evade pressure, step up in the pocket, stuff like that. And that's exactly what happened. Again, they got in the backfield from time to time. They did get pressure, but Josh Allen was able to mitigate it, able to evade it, able to move around, whether it be just stepping up or rolling out. Josh Allen was able to evade pressure. So overall, it was a strong game from the offensive line. I don't think I feared like a week 1 scenario where there was just pressure coming from all sides, but like their defensive line is talented enough that they could do it. Mm-hmm. And the Bills just mitigated it. Largely, I don't want to say shut them down, but Chase Young wasn't really that big of a factor, at least not as big of a factor as I thought he was going to be. Montez Sweat wasn't as big of a factor as I thought he was going to be. So overall, strong game from the offensive line. Speaking of strong games, Tre'Davious White, as was alluded to by the super chat earlier, Tre'Davious White had a good game, shadowed Terry McLaurin. I don't want to say that Trey was like a lockdown corner per se, but he was very good. He was matched up with Terry McLaurin, and he most definitely won the matchup. According to PFF, allowed 3 receptions for 52 yards, that on 5 targets. I had an 84.2 coverage grade from PFF. If you like their grades, fine, use that for your narrative. But Tre'Davious White, as I said, just followed Terry McLaurin and I will say, largely made him a non-factor. Again, in a game where Washington, I'm forgetting their city now. I mess up one time and I forget everything. But in a game where they were down for the majority of the game, right? Like you would expect them to go to the pass early, and you would expect them to target their number 1 receiver frequently. And Terry McLaurin really couldn't find any level of like great success. I think he finished as their leading receiver, if you don't count the 78-yard reception from Antonio Gibson that went for a touchdown, or the screen pass that went for a touchdown. Terry McLaurin was their leading receiver, but he wasn't like great. And you might look at this stat line again. Terry McLaurin finished with 4 receptions for 62 yards. 3 of those were allowed by Trey. But this came after a game where Terry McLaurin had 11 receptions for 107 yards and 1 touchdown on James Bradbury, who is a very good cornerback. So for Tre'Davious White the next week to make him a borderline non-factor, I mean, that's what you want out of your number 1 cornerback.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, you couldn't ask for anything better from Trey White. I mean, when you have a receiver that's among the best in the league, and a wide receiver and a cornerback that's among the best in the league, that's a battle that's always fun to watch. And I was surprised that they had Trey shadow him, because he doesn't normally do that against teams that have better. So I don't know if that was an issue with Levi Wallace being hurt throughout the week. But regardless, it worked out in the Bills' favor, because none of the Washington football teams receivers really had any sort of impact. And McLaurin is an explosive, just ridiculous route runner. And Trey White kind of just got to prove, like, hey, like you talk about these Jalen Ramseys and guys like that shadow the number 1 receivers every game. And I think Trey White kind of gets lost in the shuffle because he doesn't, and he's just so sound with what he does within Buffalo's scheme that he's kind of an afterthought. And I'm glad that he got to step up and do that yesterday and show that, like, look, I am capable of defending the team's number one cornerback and shutting them down for the most part. So yeah, I was happy to see White have a huge game.
And the defense, I mean, you're going to talk about the defense, but in a negative light here in a second. So let's just praise them a little bit more before we get into that. The defense in general had a great game. I thought, again, Taron Johnson had a strong game. Tremaine Edmonds, you sent a tweet yesterday where it was like Tremaine Edmonds compared to Matt Milano, like, isn't as flashy, isn't as good of a player, but he's still, like, good. Like, he's still
right. I think, like, people really misconstrued that tweet where I said that Tremaine Edmonds kind of underwhelmed me. I didn't think yesterday he had the best game ever, but I think overall, like, when you contrast his style of play to Matt Milano's, where Milano is just so intense and you can feel him, whereas Edmonds is just kind of steady. He's not going to make huge mistakes, but he's not going to make the huge plays. That it's just like when it's a guy that you're going to pay $17 million to, or he's probably going to be looking for that.
Oh boy, that's gonna be fun. They don't have to worry about that for what? 2 weeks?
We'll talk about
2
that
weeks, 2 years. In 2 weeks, they're gonna have to give Tremaine Edmonds his money. But a strong defensive game. Actually, what went right was going to be the run defense, but then I thought about it and I was like, well, they were down for most of the game. They obviously weren't going to run the ball, so it would be stupid for me to be like, yeah, they were great in run defense. Washington ran the ball 6 times, but no, obviously that's hyperbole. But yes, I will now let you. I don't know if you're gonna trash the defense here. I don't know what you're gonna do, but Rob, what do you think went wrong?
No, and this is really kind of just nitpicking at a second takeaway for what went wrong in this game. I was going to say Isaiah McKenzie went wrong, but like I said earlier, that was more Mother Nature. Yeah. He does have to field that, but I will say that I wanted to see more out of Buffalo's defensive line in terms of pass rush. After they're getting 46 pressures and all those sacks against Miami a week ago, they really kind of laid an egg against Washington yesterday. Nobody had more than 2 pressures, and that was an offensive line that I thought they could take advantage of. And it wasn't even a situation where it was like week 1 when Roethlisberger was getting the ball out in 2.5 seconds every time, bang, bang. Heineke averaged 3.6 seconds from snap to throw, and I know that he was scrambling around a little bit, and the coverage was so good. But I would have liked to see them get some sacks off that coverage, because when he's back in the pocket for that long, I think you got to clean up. And make those cleanup sacks. So again, just nitpicking of something to find that went wrong on defense, but overall they were great in every other aspect. So
George McCorsh, great name, writes, yesterday's D-line game plan seemed like it was in contained mode, so he wouldn't scramble. I agree. I do think that they planned around Taylor Heineke's athleticism. It did kind of seem like it was like, okay, he might do more damage on the ground than he will with his arm.
Micah Hyde after the game said that they knew that he's a guy where if his first read's covered, then he's going to try to scramble around and make things happen with his legs. So that definitely probably factored into the game plan. But like I said, I think even with interior pressure, I think that there were matchups with guys like Eric Flowers and guys like that. So I think that they could have done better. But like I said, just nitpicking.
All right. I mean, this segment is all nitpicking because it was a 43-21 win. Like, really, very few things went wrong in this win. But they had opportunities to get sacks, right? Like on the Antonio Gibson touchdown, Mario Addison was so close to getting a sack. Like, I do feel like they were close to hitting on a couple of opportunities. They just didn't, which, I mean, it is underwhelming, right? After that first 2 weeks, especially after week 2, where they had all those pressures and Greg Rousseau had 2 sacks and everyone was looking great. It was a bit underwhelming to see them bounce back or to come back with this outing, but I'm not overly concerned. Again, I'm not hitting the panic button on the I don't think you're not either, but
No.
we need to talk about something. This is a segment for something.
Definitely.
I also love how I'm like, we need to do this. We need to find things that went wrong, but it's our show, and we could very easily just be like, nope, nothing went wrong. But nope, we have to talk about things that went wrong. Again, I'm in the same boat here in terms of trying to find something that went wrong. What went wrong is Devin Singletary, and it's not even that he was bad. He was just underwhelming, especially compared to Zach Moss. As I said, he just wasn't again, not bad, but 34 snaps, 26 yards on 11 touches, 2.4 yards per carry. That's not great, but I think he had more poor plays that stick with me than Zach Moss. Well, Zach Moss really didn't have any noticeably poor plays, but Devin Singletary on the first play of the game had a handoff up the middle that went for nothing, and then he had a drop on the next play, and then there was a 4th and 2 later on that I don't remember if it was a handoff or a reception, but he caught it maybe a yard or two in front of the first down marker, and instead of going upfield, he tried to do a spin, and he went backwards as opposed to moving upfield, which wasn't great. So I'm not hitting the panic button on Devin Singletary. I'm not saying bench Devin Singletary. I'm not saying Matt Breida should play ahead of Devin Singletary. But as of right now, I do think it is clear that Zach Moss should be the 1A moving forward, which he might already be because, as I said earlier, the snap count divvied up like that. I mean, Zach Moss had 44 snaps compared to Singletary's 34. So maybe I'm just preaching to the choir here. Maybe Zach Moss already is the 1A, but I do think, again, Singletary wasn't bad, just underwhelming compared to Zach Moss. And I do think that, Singletary was a nice offseason story, but I think Moss is the better player at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I think Moss probably is the guy you want for those early downs, but Singletary, I just don't think it was the game script for him against that type of defense. That's going to have to be physical, and you're going to have to get those tough yards, like I said earlier. But Singletary, he did have those mistakes. I think he got to run past the sticks on that one catch that was stopped. But I don't think that he's the guy that's gonna run through those defensive lines like that. But when you have a defense like Miami, he can give you those big plays. But yeah, I think Zach Moss is more consistent and all around. I think he's the better player, but I'm not really down on Devin Singletary. And like you said, this is just nitpicking. So
have to nitpick. Government mandate. You have to find things wrong with the Buffalo Bills. It's not Josh Allen this week, though. Oh, what is this? Why, when we talk poorly about Josh Allen, we're threatened to get canceled? But when I say Devin Singletary was slightly underwhelming, no one's banging on my door unless they might be. I don't know. I locked it. So if I'm not here next week, the Devin Singletary crowd came after me. John DeMarchi, super chat again. Thank you so much. Right, it's gotta bounce. Just an attaboy here and great Bills content from an old man, a Bills fan behind enemy lines in the 305. That sounds like a rap bar. Rob, if I drop a beat, can you spit that?
Not me.
Well, I'll make it next week again. If the Devin Singletary crowd didn't get me, and I'm back next week, that will be in a rap. All right, so I think it's time to now move on to the hot take segment, everyone's favorite segment where we give hot takes. My hot take, Rob. This is the people.
We haven't gotten canceled yet.
I was surprised they didn't cancel me yet. Here we go. My hot take: Davis Mills throws for 400 as the Texans upset the Bills.
That's lukewarm. Again.
That's a joke, obviously. No, this may comparatively be a lukewarm take, but it's just the fact that this exists is hilarious, so I have to make something about it. The Bills are 17.5-point favorites against the Houston Texans, at least as of last I checked. They were 17.5-point favorites over the Houston Texans. I personally can't remember a similar line. I think week 3 against Minnesota in 2018, I do think it was something like this. I think Minnesota was crazy favored, but I don't think it was 17.5 points.
I think there were 21, someone told me yesterday on Twitter.
Minnesota?
Yeah.
I can't believe I remembered that. Look at someone should hire me. The Bills should hire me, and then I'll just give stupid things that I vaguely remember that they
from
can
2018, yeah.
Right, that they can go further look into. I won't even research it. I'll just tell you I think that happened. But so my hot take is that the Bills cover the 17.5-point spread.
I don't think that's too crazy. I mean, their point differential is 50 now. The Texans are so bad. Watching that Thursday night game, there was like a mile of space between DJ Moore and any Texans secondary player, and it was just crazy. And I think that Josh Allen can just light them up, and it's not going to be a pretty game for the Texans.
I don't listen to my first hot take. I agree with what Rob said. I do think this is going to be. It's a good final tune-up game before they enter Kansas City and Tennessee. You know, they're tough games on their schedule, but this comes at a good time. And I do think, if any of you, I don't know why you would, but if you look at my tally site predictions, I'm going to predict the Bills to cover that 17.5-point spread this week, regardless of how crazy it is. I think they're going to cover. So, Rob, what is your hot take? Is it hotter than my take?
Depending on how you see things, but I think Stephon Diggs finally has a breakout game next week and scores not one, not two, but 3 touchdowns against the awful Houston Texans defense. Diggs, it's not a matter of if that production's coming, really, but when. I mean, he's gotten 31 targets this year in 3 games, so he's still the guy that Josh Allen is looking to feed. It's the opportunities just haven't come. The rush throws in week 1 by Allen, the lockdown coverage by Xavier Howard in week 2, just all the passes over the middle into Sanders yesterday. I think next week or this upcoming week is when Diggs finally gets his time to shine, and we see a performance reminiscent of last season, and he really gets on track. So I think Diggs is in for a monster game. I'm going to say 3 touchdowns to keep it hot. So
I need to address controversy unfolding in the comments. All right, so in response to my take that the Bills are going to cover one of the craziest spreads in recent memory, Roman writes, ice cold take from Kyle as per usual. When Rob says, good receiver will score touchdowns against bad team, Roman writes, that's hot. This is favoritism. This is nepotism. Is that your burner, Rob?
No, not me.
Oh, likely story.
Never.
All right, I need the
3 touchdowns from anybody's pretty hot. You got to give it to me.
Covering a 17.5-point spread is pretty hot.
They won by 35 and 22, so against better teams.
You know, okay, strike that hot take. I'm going back to Davis Mills throws 400 yards and the Houston Texans win convincingly. How's that one, Roman? Is that a hot enough take for you? All right. So I think that wraps up. He's a plant. I agree. He's a plant sent by Big Cover One to take down Kyle's hot takes. So thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Cover One Roundup. Again, here live on the Cover One YouTube channel every Monday at 7 p.m. and subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to follow Cover One on Twitter at Cover One. Like us on Facebook. Consider subscribing to Cover One Premium. There you can join the Cover One Premium Slack where you can talk with us. Again, you just listen to us talk for an hour. I know you're just jonesing to talk with us even more. So thank you again. Thank you for listening to us for an hour. So make sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Cover One on most things. On Instagram, I think there's a few underscores in there, but it's easy to find. Make sure to follow our Cover One writers on Twitter, always producing some great content. Make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, use promo code Cover1. Make sure to follow Rob on Twitter at
Rob Quinn 619, and definitely subscribe to the premium content. We've got some good stuff coming, written stuff, Eric's video content in the Slack channel. Definitely do it. It's cheap. You won't find a better deal for better content.
Oh, we have people doing hot takes. Dude on the left is from Seattle and on the right from Canada. Hot take. if this is about us, I don't know. But I have been to I have been to Seattle actually. I went to Seattle like 2 months ago, but no. I think we're both from the
sadly mistaken Puka 3.
You're not Canadian?
Nope.
I was under the impression you were Canadian. That's why I agreed to do the show.
No. Cancel. We made it 10 episodes.
And they were 10 good episodes, but unfortunately, the 10th episode must come to an end. So you can follow me on Twitter if you want, at Kyle Silagyi. If not, that's fine. So thank you guys for watching. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.